Welcome to the Debunkers Fireside Chat,
where your two favorite billionaire intellectuals answer your questions.
Is anyone else in the bunker with you? Anyone, say, that might have pretended to commit suicide or is trying to avoid being suicided?
Oh, not all billionaires associate with pedophiles.
Yes, it's not like we're in the film industry.
The next question from DKTZ00 is, did Ben Shapiro ever comment on his, quote, appearances, unquote?
Indeed he did. Ben commented on one of his appearances on his podcast and has tweeted other videos that Freedom Tunes has done about him.
NSFW Herald asks, do the debunkers have dirt on the Clintons and that's why they're really in the bunker?
Please, at this point there's so much dirt on the Clintons out there this bunker could be buried in it. There really isn't much that we know that you can't find out from a simple Google search.
Except for the kind of anime they watch. But we're going to keep that to ourselves.
Yes, this bomb shelter may be capable of withstanding a nuclear blast, but it isn't enough to stop the Clintons from killing someone. Rainer Bogle asks, do the debunkers spend time on 4chan? Well, what on earth is 4chan?
Does he mean like 4chan 500? I've spent time on that list, yes. Dan and Matt asks, to the debunkers, how do you view net neutrality?
Meh, not a huge fan, but I'm also not a tech expert, and this is never really something I was super interested in, so take my opinion here with a grain of salt. As I understand, net neutrality expanded the regulatory power of the FCC in order to solve completely theoretical problems which might arise from the market finding ways to deal with bandwidth scarcity or something like that. My main takeaway is that the amount of fear-mongering surrounding net neutrality's repeal was astounding, considering it had only been in effect for like a year or two, and the internet was just fine before it came around. And everything has been fine ever since. So I'm hard-pressed to see how or why it was this amazing thing we shouldn't have repealed. But again, it's not something I'm particularly passionate about or have gotten the chance to dive into super deeply, so take all of that with a grain of salt.
My net view of it is neutral. The Water Guy 17 asks, what would it take for the debunkers to leave their bunker permanently?
For the Clintons to stop killing people.
Ever and asks, do the debunkers belong to a secret intelligence agency?
Yes, the Libertarian Party. They do a fantastic job keeping their intelligence a secret.
Ha! He's kidding. We don't belong to the Libertarian Party.
And neither should you.
Hamada JJ asks, can we get rid of those news media outlets that do not inform but disinform the masses?
I don't see it happening. Our best hope is to spread the counter-narrative as often and efficiently as possible before they get their stranglehold over the internet. Vigard asks, should there be a proportional electoral system for legislatures? I honestly haven't given that one much thought, so I can't answer it for you. But it is a good question. I'll leave it to the comment sections.
Let us know how you feel about that below. Scott David Gray asks, apart from any inherent value to a particular tradition, is there any advantage to society generally having, respecting, and following traditions?
This is an interesting question. While I generally argue for the maintenance or revival of traditional modes of thinking or being from a place of understanding that many of these traditions were developed for very good reasons and shouldn't be, or shouldn't have been, discarded, I do believe there's something to be said for tradition itself being inherently valuable. Of course, particular traditions can be immoral. Persisting in wrongdoing over long stretches of time is not justification for further continuation, but all things being equal, we should err on the side of tradition. And a society which understands this and must be thoroughly convinced of new ideas rather than simply jumping on the bandwagon of whatever happens to be trendy, will benefit from their sobriety. B. Smith asks, how do you talk to people who don't actually want liberty? That's the real problem in this country. Many people no longer value liberty.
Anyone who doesn't want liberty is more than welcome to come work for me.
In all seriousness, this is a growing issue. While I don't view liberty to be the highest value, it's clearly a necessary and good one, and yet many people seem to have abandoned its pursuit. Those in power have done a fantastic job convincing the public that their problems have resulted from government being too hands-off, when in many cases the exact opposite is true. And there's a growing sentiment that the idea of freedom is some kind of scam sold to us by neoliberalism in order to convince us that we have agency, when in reality we're just slaves to consumerism or something along those lines. I believe there's some truth to that in the modern age, but it's a very incomplete analysis, especially considering the alternative here is government, and everything it does is forceful. Yes, sometimes force is necessary, but we need to be sober about what we're calling for whenever a new law or regulation is proposed. Sophia Gomez asks, to fanfic or not to fanfic?
Oh, do we want to open this Pandora's box?
How's this? Sophia, you have our blessing to write any fanfic you want, No one else is allowed.
Great call, they're definitely gonna listen.
Nate Boyer asks, did Epstein kill himself?
Yes, and he sent out 13 cassette tapes to the people who he viewed as responsible.
Yes, in fact, we were among the people he sent them to.
I'm halfway done with my tape, and let me be honest, I really don't regret cyberbullying him. Jason Garrison asked, how did you both build up your fabulous fortune? And Shorewall asked, how did the Debunkers become rich?
Good question. I'm old money, meaning my family accumulated and maintained their fortune over generations through hard work and good breeding.
And I was a crack dealer.
Juan asks, how do you respond to Elizabeth Warren calling you, quote, crybaby billionaires, unquote, for not supporting her wealth tax?
It really hurt my feelings.
The government has an annual budget of over $4 trillion. I find it rather ironic that someone running to be in a position to help manage that kind of budget could whine about it not being enough and then call anyone else a crybaby.
John Padalus asks, what's your favorite part of the bunker?
Good question. I like the exercise room.
And I love the kitchen.
Donald Line asks, does pineapple belong on pizza? If not, what about macaroni and cheese on pizza? What on earth is a cheese pizza?
Oh, pizza! It's a kind of poor people food.
Well, then I wouldn't know what belongs on it. Vincent asks, if you had to vote for a Democrat, who would it be?
If there was a gun to my head, Hillary.
Really? Why?
To stop her from pulling the trigger. Zach asks, how much air is left in the bomb shelter?
15, maybe 20 minutes? We really should have installed a chimney before having this fire.
John Padalus also asks, is a hot dog a sandwich?
Absolutely not. It's its own category of food. If anyone calls a hot dog a sandwich, let him be anathema.
Sherry Duggar asks, what's your favorite food?
Truffles.
And caviar.
Nolan asks, do either of you have kids, or did Shapiro destroy them in a debate?
Ben Shapiro has destroyed everything I've ever loved or cared about in a debate. Eliyahu asks, why has much of the Republican Party stopped focusing on conservative ideals?
If I had to venture to guess, I would say that the Republican Party, as well as establishment conservatism in general, has or have abandoned conservative ideals because the donors don't care for them very strongly. These ideals are good for a nation's long-term health, but they aren't particularly profitable in the short term, and so they're ignored. Expanding the warfare state and maintaining crony capitalism for themselves and their rent-seeking friends is a much more lucrative business model, and endorsing whatever it is the left was fighting for 10 years ago is a nice way to wrap that agenda up in a trendy and inclusive package for the public to consume. Matt asks, what is the Federal Reserve and why is it pure concentrated evil?
The Federal Reserve is pure concentrated evil.
And for so many reasons, Matt. We're actually in the preliminary phases of producing a video on this. I'm pretty excited for it.
Francis asks, why do most Christians hate Islam more than feminism when Islam and Christianity are so similar, and when feminism is the reverse?
This is a very interesting question. I would first say it really does all depend upon how we're defining feminism and how we're defining Islam. Many Christians probably do dislike modern feminism with its gender confusion and abortion worship more than they dislike Islam. However, things are complicated by the fact that while feminism is ceaselessly searching for new erroneous claims to make about the natural world, Islam makes erroneous claims about the supernatural, denying the divinity of Christ, for example, and so their worldview is also deeply incompatible with Christianity. So I reject the premise that the religions are similar. And then there's the historic issue of jihadists being a very serious and violent threat to Christians since the inception of Islam, waging wars and stealing Christian land, resulting in the Crusades. I definitely appreciate where you're coming from and recognizing that many Muslims are good conservative people who don't like the radical left any more than you or I do. But with the religion taken as a whole, it's difficult for me to say that we're fellow travelers.
And finally, Tartar Icing asks, what music do you like?
Precious metal!
Thank you so much for watching, everyone!
Hey folks, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please check out subscribestar.com/freedomtunes to help us make more content. Thank you so much.